Well, hello and welcome. And you are not mistaken. We are here twice in 1 week. This doesn't usually happen. We have another really amazing live event today. Of course, my name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization was started about 3.5 years ago. Began around the issue of restraint and seclusion happening in schools across the country. Has since then really expanded into not just restraint and seclusion, but very often all the things that are being done to and happen to children that are very often having a difficult time in schools and other settings across the nation. We are a big believer of, really kind of changing the model to be trauma informed and neuroscience aligned and collaborative and relationship driven. So we do a lot of work both with legislation and with education. And that's why we do these events, these live events. They're a great opportunity to talk about ways that we can do things better. They're also a fantastic opportunity to meet people and hear about their work, which is really what we're going to do today. I have a couple of special guests that will be joining me, and I'm going to do their introductions here in a moment. But we have Dr. Lori Desautels, who will be on here joining us today, as well as her daughter, Reagan. And we also have Alexis, who is Reagan's fiance. And we're going to be talking about the collaboration that all of them had in creating this new book, this book that happens to be sitting here beside me, which some of you have probably already heard about and maybe even pre-ordered, but it's a book called Intentional Neuroplasticity, Moving Our Nervous Systems and Educational Systems Toward Post-Traumatic Growth. And it's fantastic. And I can tell you that from firsthand experience, although it's not yet widely available, I have had an opportunity to read it, and it's absolutely fantastic. So we're going to be having a conversation today. I do want to let you know, as always, and any of you that have been watching for a while know, these are being recorded. We put these out live on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. We also put it out as an audio podcast. So if you're not able to catch the whole thing right now, you can go back and watch it or listen to it later. And of course, the other thing we encourage you to do is share these events with fellow, educators, with fellow parents, with anybody that you're working with that, we're working to move kind of in different directions. So all that said, let's get to the good stuff. We've got a really exciting program on tap for the day, and I'm going to begin by introducing our special guest. Now, I'll begin by introducing Dr. Lori Desautels and telling you a little bit about her background. Now, of course, my first assumption is if you've been watching these for a while, Dr. Lori. Dr. Lori has actually been our most frequent guest here on our live events. And I don't know how many we've up to now, probably 6 or 7. One of us or the other have an idea all the time about things that we can share. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Desautels. Of course, I assume that everybody knows who you are in your work, but just to, make people aware that might not be aware of who you are. You've been an assistant professor at Butler University since about 2016, and you teach both undergraduate and graduate programs in the College of Education. You were also an assistant professor at Marian University in Indianapolis for 8 years, where you founded the Educational Neuroscience Symposium, which is really exciting. Currently, the symposium has been its 10th year, now sponsored by Butler University College. And through these conferences and symposiums, educators and parents and the community learn about how deeply adversity, trauma, and resilience impact developing nervous systems. So you do a lot of work around kind of social, emotional, cognitive well-being. Of course, your work has been, shared in many ways, which we'll talk about. But you also have this amazing certification program at Butler University, one that I talk about frequently. And as you know, we often have students that have been through your program. So you have this amazing program in applied educational neuroscience, brain and trauma, that has grown from a pilot year in 2016 to over 400 graduate students. Now in the 7th cohort, I think that might still be right. But every year you're getting more and more. And of course, it's open to people around the world. And I've actually met people around the world that have been part of your cohorts, from New Zealand to, of course, the United States, Canada, all throughout the world. But this is a really amazing program that you offer. And one of the things that I found is that all the people that are part of your cohorts I've yet to find one that hasn't been amazing, Lori, and that probably doesn't surprise you. I was telling our guest yesterday, Robert Belts, I'm like, I don't know if it's the people that are attracted to the program or what happens during the program, but amazing people, and the work that you're doing is really having a tremendous amount of impact. Of course, you do a lot of presentation video, a lot on your website, revelationsineducation.com. Your first book was How May I Serve You? Revelations in Education, which you had done with Michael McKnight, who was another previous guest here on the show, somebody that I love and think very highly of as well. Of course, you had the book The Eyes Are Never Quiet in 2018, Rewiring Our Perceptions of Discipline. Of course, one of my very favorite books, has been this Connections Over Compliance book. And again, I was very fortunate to be able to read this as you were finishing the book. And the title alone was enough to really, kind of hit me in a place that I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we're trying to get to. And of course, we are here today to talk about your latest work, which is intentional neuroplasticity. And, again, I don't know how you do all that you do, Lori. And I know that at times I've said, Lori, do you ever rest? You need to take, and you tell me, well, I'm taking today off, and that's about all. But, this work that you're doing is really, really amazing. And I have tremendous amount of admiration and respect for all that you do and the changes that you're making. So, Lori, let me begin by welcoming you. And I'm sure I could read probably 2 more pages of your credentials and bio. So if I left anything out, I apologize. But it's great to have you here.
Guy, I just can't thank you enough. And as I shared, this is a gift to our family, to be able to share this book and to know how closely Alexis and Reagan and I work together. It was really a process that I'm going to get teary. I mean, it's just such an honor as a mom to be with Reagan and he's already my son. So it's just such a gift. Thank you. Thank you for this.
And thank you. We're really excited to have you. And I'm going to share another little story with you in a minute. But before I do, let me go ahead and introduce Reagan and Alexis, and give you a little bit of background on that as well. And I hear you. I mean, what a tremendous, amazing process to go through to have this opportunity. And I'm so excited. Months ago, I remember talking to you about this, and you're like, well, Guy, I want you to be the first interview I do. And I'm like, well, that's amazing. Let's do it. And so excited to be here to talk about this work and to talk about all the amazing things you're doing. And fantastic. So Reagan Desautels is an artist from Indiana, and Alexi Cruz Gomez. Am I getting proper? Okay. An artist from Hidalgo, Mexico. Okay. Okay? And help me out if I get this something wrong here. And you guys are really a creative team that works together on illustrations, wood burning, murals. Reagan has worked as an independent artist and muralist in Chicago and Hidalgo. I'm sorry if I'm not doing well here. Alexis has worked as a graphic designer for some local organizations like Sabres Collectives. You're going to have to help me out here. And Alamex. And I'm not going to try to read all of that, but if you could, Reagan, help me out here with that stands for what?
Yeah, Aldimex.
Aldimex.
It's okay. Alianza de. It's Alexis. Tienes que ayudar un poco. No me acuerdo. I don't remember exactly, but Alexis does. ¿Qué es Aldimex?
Alianza Indígena México.
Okay.
So Indigenous Alliance in Mexico.
Gotcha. Great. And I appreciate that. As well as international organizations like Slow Food. The creative team has most recently worked on graphics for Dr. Stephen Porges, who we are all fans of here and have talked to Stephen Porges as well. And Seth Porges' new book and illustrated Dr. Lori Desautels' new book, Intentional Neuroplasticity, which we're here to talk about today. And their development together as and separate as artists has taught them to never stop learning from their work. And I think that's a lesson for all of us, and has shown them the magic that comes from collaborating with their clients and breathing life into color and their words and stories. Reagan and Alexis, it is so nice to have you both here today. One of the things that as the book was coming to life, and that's probably the best way to put it, as the book was coming to life, I know that Lori was occasionally sharing some of the illustrations, and the feel that it began to bring into this work is absolutely amazing. I'm a very visual person myself, and as I've kind of flipped through the book, one of the first things that really catches my attention has been these illustrations. So we're going to talk a lot today about the book, and I'm going to talk specifically with you and Alexis about the illustrations as well. But before I do, again, thank you both so much for being here today. It's really an honor to have you here.
Guy, thank you so much. I mean, my mom said it, but it is a huge gift, and it's our pleasure. I thank you for opening up this space and including us in this conversation too. It means a lot.
And absolutely, it's an honor all the way around. I've had the opportunity, to meet you previously, and of course, I have met your father Michael as well. And you are all wonderful people. It is a pleasure to meet Alexis as well. I've heard a number of really, and you can share this with him, but a number of amazing things about him. Recently had the opportunity to talk to Lori and Michael, and I can just tell you that the positivity was overflowing, and it's great to have you both here. And of course, what I didn't mention, or may have mentioned very briefly, is that Alexis is your fiance. So as Lori said, it really is about the family here. So great to have you here both.
Thank you so much, Guy. I'll just do a quick translation. Después se presentó mi mamá, después presentó a nosotros y diciendo que agregó mucho al libro, aprende mucho visualmente, y la vida y color que agregó a la publicación fue mucho, y aumentó la experiencia de leerlo. Y específicamente sobre ti, que recientemente cuando ha hablado con mi mamá, que ha escuchado muchas cosas muy lindas, muy buenas sobre ti, creativamente y también como eres como persona. Y gracias. Ajá. Thank you very much, he says.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your translation there. This is so fantastic to be able to do this. Now, Alexis is currently in Mexico. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So it's always amazing to be able to do these things with people from across the world. So I assume you're there in Indiana, and here I am in Maryland on the East Coast. And of course, one of the things that Lori, I know you know well, is that we actually have people from all over the world that join on to these live events. And I typically tell people as we're beginning that, we get people from New Zealand and Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, the United States, of course, but really do get people from all over the world. And on that note, I'm going to remind people that are watching now, let us know who you are and where you're from. I know we've got quite a few people that are on live with us at the moment. So it's always great to see in the comments where people are from and kind of who they are. I know there's a lot of excitement about this new book. We had anticipated that it was going to go on pre-order today, and it started on pre-order, it looks like yesterday, but I saw the excitement. People are like, ordered, as you shared that this is now available, and we'll try to get those links available in the chat as well. So the book is currently available for pre-order. And what was the date that's going to be actually begin shipping? Do you know, Lori?
So I believe January 24th, 2023. Yeah.
Okay. So it won't be long. It won't be long at all. And folks will be able to get their hands on the new book. And of course, I am honored to have had the opportunity to read an advanced copy and to provide some of my, thoughts and praise for this book. I mean, as I said before, your previous works have always been really, really inspiring. So I want to talk a little generally about the book, and then I want to pivot into talking about the illustrations and the art, and then Lori, we'll come back to talking more about kind of the content. But just tell me briefly, Lori, it wasn't long ago that your last book, Connections Over Compliance, came out, and knowing the schedule and the work that you are doing nonstop, it's almost hard to imagine how you could have written another book since then. But what was the driving force behind this book? What was the reason that you wanted to bring this to life and get this out to people?
So I think I think that the lived experiences being in the school. So as soon as Connections Over Compliance was written, as you know, my work is back in the classroom. So here I am, you know, in the second and third year of the pandemic in a large middle school, and then working with more and more districts across the world. And I was so moved and inspired by not only what educators and the communities were understanding and grasping, but they were wanting now what? They were wanting, we're understanding how trauma impacts the nervous system. But now what do? We're ready to move forward. And so as I worked with seventh grade students and my team at Belzer and continued to meet with administrators and teachers and parents and communities, I began to really think about, you know, that not only is trauma held in the body, but resiliency is held in the body. And this is a significant piece of this that I think we're ready to move towards. So I think that was the inspiration. And I think I was able to really write this book as I was learning, which is such a gift. And then Dr. Porges, at the same time, asked me to create modules for educators to integrate polyvagal theory into our classrooms and schools. So it all collided in the most, you know, complex, but yet perfect way.
Gotcha. And you know, I know, and probably didn't go over all of this in your bio, but you spent a number of years in the classroom. But not only did you spend a number of years in the classroom, you still are in the classroom and working with and alongside educators. And as one of your educators you work with one time put it, Lori Kirkland, she said, you know what I love about Dr. Lori? She's not just up in some ivory tower trying to give us advice, but, you know, she's in the classroom. She's there working with us. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of your background in education and kind of what you're doing today in the classroom?
So I think this is my 9th year back in the classroom. So I'm a former special education teacher, and I taught children with the classification of emotionally disturbed, which is also known as behavior disordered, emotionally impaired. And then I was so, and this is so interesting, I was so perplexed that these children were being labeled emotionally disturbed, and I didn't believe it. It didn't feel right to my nervous system at the time, that I left teaching after 7 years in the classroom, in a self-contained classroom. And my colleague and I opened up Indianapolis Counseling Center and began working with the family system of children that had that label of emotionally disturbed, behavior disordered, because we really wanted to get underneath the behavior, you know, even in the late 80s, early 90s. So that was, and then as a former school counselor, you know, I had another angle. I had another perspective to really see and to start looking at what is underneath these behaviors that we keep labeling, classifying, and ruling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you shared there. You know, one of the things that always comes to my mind, I'm not a big fan of the ED label that is so prevalent out there. And you know, it's just really interesting that, you know, kind of that's where you started. And you know, kind of subsequently, though, of course, you know, you began to work with the universities, began to, you know, present these ideas and develop these ideas through books. But, you know, you've continued working in the classroom and work in the classroom on a regular basis. And again, having talked to some of the educators and some of the teams of people that you've worked with, I think that's important. I mean, one of the things I really admire about you is, you know, what you say and what you say about going back into the classroom and learning and sharing and growing. And Reagan, you said something very similar in your bio, but it was really that, you know, through these experiences that you're having, that you're working to help and you know, provide things to help educators in these difficult times, but you're also learning from them, alongside them, and bringing more lessons and ideas into the work as it moves forward. And that's such an important thing. It's easy for, it's easy to come from an outside perspective with all the things that people should do, but to be there in these times working with people is so important. And I really love that about your work. So I'm going to pivot here a little bit and just ask you, and then we're going to talk a bit about the artwork and then come back to you with a lot of questions about the book. But as this book began to develop, at what point in the process did you realize or have this idea that illustrations and artwork and getting these visuals into the book were going to be a process, and how did you come to that? And I know Reagan had done things for you in the past, but how did you come to that point where you're like, oh, this has got to be a part of this work?
Wow. I'm just even trying to think back. This book feels and felt like the culmination of the work that we had been doing. And Reagan has been sitting beside me in this work, helping me to understand, how equity and the disproportionality of so many of our students has been such a critical factor in this work. And that as we look at intentional neuroplasticity, we actually, through conversations, FaceTiming for hours at a time, began to think about images that aligned with this work that is about post-traumatic growth, not only individually, but collectively as a school, as a district, as a community. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, so many people love and know my mom, and I have just the biggest honor and gift in the world to be her daughter, which this is probably gonna happen throughout the interview of us just getting silly tears. But because of that, she's one of my favorite writers. She is my favorite writer, and I've gotten to see my mom's poetry too, from before she wrote her books. But when I was reading it, she was sending me chapters at a time. And when I started reading the introduction, I felt her words on the page. I felt her poetry even through the introduction when she was talking about what this book means to her personally. Especially that image that is the quote for the introduction illustration that we made, talking about her sitting with herself, with her feelings, and her feelings feeling like leaves swirling around her on a cold afternoon. And that was nice. This needs pictures. The pictures are already there in the words, but Alexis and I would be the team to add those pictures. And Alexis and I had seen some examples of books that had done similar things. We didn't know exactly what that challenge would look like before starting, but that kind of planted the seed. But really, it was looking at the poetry that's also in this book.
It's interesting. You and I, Reagan, had the opportunity to meet some time ago, and I'm gonna go with recollection. I may be wrong, but was your background in social justice, or what was your background in academically?
Yeah, my background is Spanish and psychology, but my minors were in peace, justice, and conflict studies.
Gotcha. Okay, and that's what I was recalling here, and it's so interesting because that intersection even there between your work and your mother's work, and it sounds like that's kind of what came to life here, and kind of getting to the point where the illustrations and whatnot came to mind. So what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to share my screen in a second, and I want to bring up some of the illustrations that you created, that you and Alexis created for this book, and talk a little bit about them. But I just think it's so beautiful that the collaboration that you have had, all of you, as a family working on this. I was sharing with you before we started this, but I'd met Lori in Virginia recently, and I had my daughter with me. And my daughter is also very interested in art, although she's also interested. She's told me before this, no lie, that she's interested in either neuroscience or psychology. Lori, at some point, you might need to, do some advising there for her. But she's also an avid drawer and illustrator, and I had gotten up to go to the restroom at one point. Next thing I know, I come back and Audrey's showing Lori all her drawings. And as you mentioned, Lori was showing some of the work that you were working on, and asked Audrey for her input, my 13-year-old daughter. And Audrey shared input, and then you were sharing with me earlier, like, Oh, we actually used that input. It was really helpful.
You did.
So, I love that connection. I was thinking to myself ahead of this event today, oh, wow. I mean, how much would I like, I mean, not that this is in my immediate path, but well, I'd love to write a book and have my daughter help me with all this. So, what an amazing thing you've done. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So bear with me for a second. And I'm going to pull up my screen. And this is actually going to be coming from your one of your portfolio sites that you have. And I can share these links with folks in the chat as well. But what I wanted to do was get to some of the artwork that is included in the book, because it really is amazing. The artwork that you've included here. And again, when I think about Lori's work and I think about thoughts and feelings and emotions and touch points and all of this, the art is so appropriate and intentional for this book that it really, I think, adds so much to it. And this was the piece that you were talking about initially, and I wonder if you might be able to share with our audience here a little bit about you mentioned the words and the poetry, but a little bit about how all this came to be. And it looks like Alexis had dropped off briefly, but we'll bring him back on here. There we go. So I'll let you, Reagan, if you want to start, but then if you want to bring Alexis into the conversation and kind of get some reflection from him as well, I would love that.
Yeah, of course. I'll just do a quick little translation break so he can process the question while I answer. ¿Quieres saber cómo llegamos a cada ilustración? Pero estamos con esa primera ilustración que hicimos. ¿Qué fueron tus pensamientos mientras empezamos? ¿Cómo llegamos aquí con esta idea? So this was the first illustration that we created. And I think it was one of those moments where, as we were working on it, we had that kind of click moment. Because I read the quote to Alexis, or we translated, what we did for every chapter, we read the chapter, picked out quotes, and then we talked about which quote kind of jumped off the page to us, which one could we really see an image with. And then once we chose the quote, we did not look at each other's paper, and we drew separately to see what each person was going to create. And so my kind of initial image was my mom with leaves swirling around her, and Alexis's was the spark. And Alexis's was, that was what stood out to him. So while the leaves stood out to me and this image of my mom, he thought about this spark of change that is produced and just continues to grow. And when we brought them together, we're like, oh my gosh, well, this is the perfect combination of images. And then we worked on how to integrate them. Once we started putting the illustrations online, we started to find this style that wove between all of the illustrations, especially with these white lines that almost have this, not a spiritual element, but this unifying element. This, like, these could be hands of ancestors in the past, voices of our families. We know that we have not only intergenerational trauma, but intergenerational resilience. And I love how the kind of those lines transport to that tree, and we see where the roots become part of the leaf.
What I really love about this is the creative process. So as a creative individual, it can be difficult sometimes because you have a vision that might come to life. But very often you might be working with people like, I want a picture of this. And the way you describe your process of like reading it and finding the pieces that resonated with you, it must have felt like a really great organic process to be able to kind of come up with these ideas rather than being told, this is what we want to have a picture of. And I love that you were able to kind of both bring your elements into it. I'd love to hear a little bit about from Alexis about, kind of what, and I know you shared with us a little bit about his inspiration, but if he has anything more to add in terms of kind of his inspiration in working on this.
Si tienes cualquier otra cosa para agregar, Guy estaba hablando sobre cómo le gusta escuchar. Sorry, our dog is playing with our toy. como
We,
le
we have
gusta.
squeaky toys, so occasionally you'll hear a squeaky toy. So it's all good. We are very family friendly and very dog friendly. As I probably told Lori before, dogs are my favorite people. I guess I shouldn't be saying this to everybody, but I like most dogs better than most people. So never apologize for a dog.
Creo que ahí estaba explicando sobre cómo le gusta escuchar sobre el proceso artístico y como había mucha libertad, podíamos pensar sobre una idea y ella no nos dijo, oh, quiero esta imagen, quiero como ver qué crean ustedes. Yo estaba hablando sobre nuestros procesos de cómo llegamos a esta idea, pero quiere saber tus pensamientos también.
Oh, bueno, ha sido realmente un honor trabajar con Lori y todo el proceso, aunque parece difícil, ha sido muy fácil trabajar con la doctora Lori porque han sido conexiones de un todo.
He said it's been an honor to get to work with my mom, and even though it seems it can sound difficult or complicated, he said it's all been easy just because of all of these interconnected points in the work. This is me kind of building off that in the work of us getting to read the text, read the book, and seeing those connections with our own lives and what we make.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you knew a lot about your mother's work probably over the years because she's your mother, and probably knew a lot about what she's been doing. But a lot of this was probably new to Alexis. I'm curious, and we'll go over a couple more of the images here. But I imagine that there's been. I can only imagine the journey of going through this book. And you of course have some of the foundations and exposure and experience, and sounds like you've even been part. I can imagine the kind of the conversations that the two of you might have that probably feed into a lot of what ends up kind of in the book or other elsewise. Ask Alexis a little bit about this for him in terms of I mean, illustrating things, there's so much depth to this. So I'm just kind of curious, what's that journey been like for him, and what really has stuck out with him about this journey and what he's learned about your mom's work?
Yeah, of course. Dice que puede ver la profundidad en cada ilustración y él sabe que yo tengo la experiencia de tener a ella como mi mamá y he sabido sobre este trabajo por mucho tiempo, pero esta es como tu introducción o estaba presentando algunas de sus ideas con el libro y quiere saber cuáles puntos haciendo las ilustraciones o leyendo el texto como han pegado contigo, son más fuertes, que han tenido el impacto más fuerte en ti y cómo influye las ilustraciones.
Todo ha sido más que interesante, es un conocimiento necesario. Yo tengo pues a mis dos hermanos pequeños y el tener esta introducción con esta información es necesario y conecté totalmente con lo que está explicando en cada capítulo y fue parte de que fue fácil trabajar y es impresionante cómo es necesario este conocimiento para la educación actual.
He's saying that not only was it interesting reading it, but it was necessary. As he was reading the information, he realized how important and necessary it was. He has two younger brothers. Luis is 11, and Isaac is 16. And so thinking about their development, their growth with this lens, he was realizing how necessary the work was, in that he says that made it easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, that's, I think, true for all of us. And I only wish that Lori, I wish you had been around 20 years ago writing this, and I could have learned some of these things sooner. But we all live like that, right? We all live in thinking, gee, I wish I had known this when. But at the same time, I think being on a journey like this, where you're continually learning and asking questions is so important. That's fantastic. We'll go through a couple of images here, and then we'll shift gears a bit. But Reagan, would you tell me a little bit about this image here and kind of how this came to be?
quiere escuchar sobre esta imagen y cómo llegamos a este punto también. Entonces, para pensar mientras yo también estoy hablando. How did we get to this one? I think it was another one of those collaborations where we both drew separately. I think Alexis had this idea of the girl walking on a path that was made out of her own neurons. So kind of walking on this path inside her brain, but having it feel like that kind of overwhelming dark forest type of imagery. And then I put that kind of into a classroom. So, I mean, each illustration, that was my favorite part, was getting to see that collaboration. But we wanted to get across the worlds that our students are bringing into the classroom with them, as a, not even just a map, almost like a lens for perceiving the world. Some of the images that we have here, we don't know what a belt means to her. If she's sensing the environment for danger, to see if she's safe in an environment, what does a belt mean? For someone, a completely neutral stimulus. For another person, maybe that has been painful in the past. She's watching the clock. She's very vigilant about the clock because certain hours can mean certain things. Leaving the school day, we know that our transitions from the mornings and in the afternoons of school days can be really, really difficult for our students. So just yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say what's really interesting to me about this is that, I find often in creative work, when you really dive in, you become, whether it be unintentionally or not, but you become kind of a subject matter expert. And Lori, I've got to tell you, as I'm listening to Reagan talk about this, she's got plenty of options in terms of what to do with life. She's articulating this in a way that I could see her at some of the conferences that we attend. But you really do. I mean, Reagan, you really do kind of dive into this. And of course, you've had a lot of years to have conversations and to contribute. But I'm listening to you articulate this, and the understanding that you have of this is amazing. So I just wanted to comment.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you very much. Well, we've had a lot of time to practice.
Absolutely. So I have another image that I wanted to. Well, actually, let me pause here on this one because there's a lot going on here, and maybe Alexis can provide some comment on this image.
I'll also see if any comments on the last one too. ¿Tienes algún comentario como en la ilustración pasada o en esta ilustración?
Pues en general fue interesante cómo fuimos desarrollando ideas, bocetos en nuestros viajes pequeños, en los viajes con Gaila, y pensar qué puede funcionar y qué puede conectar con lo que tu mamá está escribiendo para que todo trabaje, todo tenga el mecanismo y nos guste el resultado.
Just in general about the experience, so many of these ideas came when in our conversations and as we were having our adventures or trips, or walking with our dog, and all of those kind of bringing our just the thoughts that you have in conversations that you think about being kind of more informal, those transferring into our creative process.
And of course, as we mentioned before, Alexis is your fiance, and of course, working with a spouse, fiance, whoever it may be, that's not always a seamless process, right? Especially, I would imagine, creative endeavors. Creatives have very strong thoughts and feelings on things sometimes, but it sounds like you had such a collaborative process. And are you continuing to collaborate on future work and future projects? I know you both kind of have your areas individually, but are you continuing to collaborate on a lot of work like this?
Que puede ser muy difícil trabajar juntos con tu esposo o pareja, pero parece que funcionamos muy bien juntos, que somos buen equipo. Y estaba preguntándonos si estamos continuando con otros proyectos juntos. Si quieres responder.
Pues creo que hemos encontrado un match en el equipo y creo que los dos polos funcionamos para sobrellevar cualquier proyecto Y creo que lo más grande es que la inspiración la estamos sacando de nuestras familias para proyectar nuestras experiencias.
Yeah, that we have found that match, both creatively as well, that we can be kind of poles for one another, which we found all the time. We are very opposite in how we work, and that we're able to use that to support each other in overcoming differences. If I'm struggling on one thing, Alexis usually knows, and if he's struggling on something, I can chime in. And that we've been able to pull from the knowledge that we both bring from our own families. I have the support and knowledge from my family, and Alexis has brought a lot of that knowledge from his family too, into how we have gotten to illustrate the book.
That's great. And do you plan to do more collaborative projects like this in the future?
Yes, we would love to. We're continuing to work with my mom. We finished not so much illustrative work, but graphic work for Dr. Stephen Porges and Seth Porges' new book. There's a possible children's book that we might be getting to collaborate on, which we're so excited about.
That could be really exciting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's great. Well, I have one more image that I want to ask you about, because this one really spoke to me. And then we'll kind of shift gears and dive in deep with Lori to talk about the book. But tell me a little bit about this. And again, as I was flipping, through the book initially, this is one that kind of grabbed me. And I think I saw it shared on social before I actually had a copy. Can you tell me a little bit about this? Maybe both you and Alexi just kind of weigh in.
¿Hay algo que quieres compartir sobre esta imagen? Dice que es uno que fue importante para él cuando lo vio.
Pues creo que nos concentramos mucho en que conectara la cita con lo que estábamos creando, y pues creo que nuestros pilares son nuestras experiencias y conectar justo con lo que estamos trabajando. Creo que también es importante mencionar que nuestros pilares han sido nuestras hermanas y sus vidas y cómo están pasando. Entonces, mis hermanos, tu hermana y todo se vuelve parte de cada proyección que estamos teniendo.
¿Estás pensando sobre los pilares como nuestros hermanos, que influye especialmente esta imagen, o también en la imagen en el pasado también?
En todo, pero aquí estamos en las manos, en los apoyos como de las raíces. Cuando estábamos dibujando era como, ¿qué piensas de esto? Y poderlo proyectar correctamente.
Yeah. So first is talking about really being guided by the text. I think this is another passage that's really that illustrates it, even just with the text alone. We loved that idea, and throughout this whole chapter of building a nest. And then
and if I could pause for a second and read the text, and then I'll let you continue with the answer there. But since we're talking about the text, I think it probably makes sense to read it here. The nest we build can nurture our young. The nest we build can make room for mistakes. The nest we build can be relational. The nest we build can hold collaboration. The nest we build can hold and sustain a new lens for discipline. The nest we build can hold unconditional love and acceptance for ourselves and our children and youth. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I felt like, yeah, these words are so important, and the way they go together with the art. So let me let you continue. I apologize.
No need to apologize. Thank you for taking that break to read the words, because they're important. And then also saying how we've been guided through our brothers and sisters, also, and family in general throughout this process, as kind of like the pillars of where we base our illustrations. And I think kind of referencing back to the other image that you had held up, Guy, of it's the little girl by the campfire. She's also the same little girl from chapter 2 on the ship. You can see her ship kind of in the distance. So she's seeking refuge from that storm. And thinking about that presence of a sister, or again, can be a family member from the past too. Having that kind of like transience, can be someone close or far. But having Alexis saying, having our brothers and sisters guide us as well.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. As I look at these images, what comes to mind is how strongly they communicate alongside of the words. And you know, I mean, I almost could imagine, and I'm gonna not describe this very well, but I'll do my best. But almost something that follows like a graphic novel format, where you have these images and these words. You know, so you know, imagine a future possibility. Would it be great if you had this kind of resource out there? These are all amazing, and I really appreciate your work on all of this, and you spending some time with us. I'd agreed that we would kind of talk about the illustrations kind of early, and we've actually covered a lot of ground here. But I would then shift into talking to Lori about the text, and let you break off as well, and not make you stay here for the whole interview. And really want to tell you how much I appreciate it. I do want to share with both of you. As I mentioned, we have people, some people let us know where they were from. And we had, just to give you a quick idea here, somebody from Ohio. As I mentioned, we had somebody from the UK that was watching, Iowa, Idaho. We have a good friend, Lori, Michael McKnight, who was watching, of course, in New Jersey. We had someone else here from Idaho, another neighbor there in Indianapolis, our friend Sandy Lerman, and of course, Angie, who was a previous cohort student, is in Indy. Now, is she doing anything with you there?
She is. She's going to join us this evening for a
Oh,
little
that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And as she would say, that's amazing. So really excited to see that. And just to let you know also, Michael weighed in, said the artwork's amazing. I love how they collaborate on the art and what Lori wrote. Very cool. Angie commented on your amazing creativity and synergy. And then Sandy left a comment here. And because I don't know Spanish, I will, Reagan, if you would, let you translate that for us. But it was to Alexis. So I'll let you share that with him.
Yeah, in English, I love all of the drawings. Thank you for sharing your talent.
Gotcha. And I know Sandy has a son that is a artist as well. So, and look, we have our friend Rob from Michigan. Rob was on with us yesterday. So glad he's able to be here. So what I'm going to do at this point is, again, thank you, Reagan. Thank you, Alexis, for joining us for this part of the live event. We're going to shift into talking to Lori more about the book, but I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. And I'm so excited to see this work going out into the world. And, the illustrations that you have worked on and taking those in with the words. I hope, and I think you do, that you both know that these things make a difference. And, people are going to look at the illustrations and the book, and the work that you've done is going to inspire and is going to make people curious. So thank you for what you've done.
Guy, thank you so much. Thank you for opening up this space in your platform. My mom shared with me the trailer for your documentary coming out, and knowing the important work that you do, and getting to share what we've been working on, the way we've gotten to support my mom. It's just a gift and honor and our pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank Alexis for me as well, and joining us, live from Mexico. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you all someday in person. And I would love to, and I'm going to put the link here in the chat for your website as well. But I'd love to explore some of your other work, and I certainly want to encourage. Do we have a website here for Alexis as well? If you do, if you can share that with me. Maybe if you can send me a little private chat with that address, I'll put that in our notes as well.
Yes, of course. I will do that right now. Estaba diciendo muchas gracias por todo, que este trabajo en que estamos colaborando es increíblemente importante, y el trabajo que has contribuido es súper importante también. Y gracias por reunirnos desde allá en Hidalgo, México.
Guy, thank you so much. I'm so sorry, but my English is not so well. So thank you for your patience. And
it's a pleasure.
And Lori, I am really, how I am thankful for this opportunity, for take our job with Reg, and let's to do this great.
Alexis, I love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Much.
So, Lori, you're still on the hook, so I'm going to keep you here. Alexis, hope to see you again, and I'll let you go. And Reagan, if you would send me that link when you get a chance, I'd appreciate it. But I will let you go join your father, and you can watch the rest of this hopefully live.
All right, I'll send it to you. You can
Okay.
you can share it.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. So Lori, as we discussed earlier, I want to dive into the book a bit, but I really wanted to take that opportunity to kind of understand not only the creative process behind it, but to really, shine a light on the amazing work that Reagan and Alexis did in bringing this book to life. Your work is amazing, and these illustrations again, I can see these as large illustrations hanging on walls in schools, and maybe we can figure out a way to make that happen somewhere.
Well, actually,
great work.
Mike, can I tell you, I wanted to share this. All of the illustrations that you shared in the book, they are all QR coded. So when you have the book, you just literally put it on your phone and it takes you to the illustrations, and they're available to print. They're available just to even look at, and they're available to even create posters and prints.
Wow. So you have those freely available for people to
Yeah,
print, or is that right?
they
Wow,
are.
that is extremely generous, and I think I would certainly encourage our educators, and we have a lot of them watching, to think about that. That'd be fantastic. So let's shift gears a bit and talk a bit more about this book. We started off by talking about kind of the inspiration behind it, but I want to start off at a really basic level.
Mhm,
Intentional neuroplasticity. So intentional, I'm with
mhm.
you. Neuroplasticity, I'm with you. But let's assume that not everyone is aware of kind of what the idea of neuroplasticity
Mhm.
is. So, what is neuroplasticity, and why is it so important for this work that you put out here?
So it really can be kind of a trendy word, and it can be misunderstood.
Right.
But I really pulled from the research of Dr. Norman Doidge. I looked at the research on plasticity from University of British Columbia, and really looked at MIT's definition. So I really wanted to be very well researched in defining plasticity, neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity really is those are the experiences that structurally and functionally change the nervous system, not just the brain. And I want to be very clear, and therapist Deb Dana talks about this. Not only does our brain have plasticity, but our nervous system has plasticity. So with every experience, our nervous system changes structurally and functionally. We all have plasticity and we use it every day. And most of us use it by default, meaning we have habits. We have routines. We get up in the morning, we have, we go to our coffee, we look at our phones, we eat certain foods all the time. We bite our nails. We have these habits that have become practiced with repetition, so they become hardwired. But intentional plasticity is what Dan Siegel talks about. It's with a focus and with attunement and awareness that we can begin to build circuitry throughout the nervous system based on the experiences we desire. And so when I began thinking about, okay, we are beginning to learn about adverse childhood experiences, and we're learning to understand how adverse communities can impact the developing nervous systems of our children and youth. But now what, as we began the show today? So as we think about intentional neuroplasticity, this is a superpower for us as human beings. And we share this with our children. I share this with second grade, third grade, fourth grade. We talk about it as our superpower, that
Mhm.
wherever you are placing your attention, wherever you are focusing, that feeling gets stronger, that thought becomes more prevalent, you get good at a skill, and even it changes the way that we can even look at behavior.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and I also want to think about, as we think about intentional neuroplasticity, I want to move away from always talking about individuals. I am seeing schools and districts carrying around collective nervous system states. And so not only do we hold trauma and adversity in our bodies individually, but I see a third grade team that is that is really in a fight flight response or in an immobilized shutdown, or I see an entire school that is functioning from a very shut down, immobilized, traditionally known as a freeze response. So this book, Guy, is really moving us into looking at collectively our our schools, our districts, our organizations, and our communities, and how we individually contribute to nervous system states that impact our children and youth.
So I want to explore this a little bit more, and I'm going to give you my very simple understanding, and then ask you to either tell me where I'm wrong, or help me along the right way. But if we know that trauma, that adversity, that all of these things can affect a developing brain, can affect any brain, and cause changes to happen in the brain, and of course those changes that happen can lead to hypervigilance. They can lead to issues with memory. They can lead to a lot of situations that often then result in distress behaviors. That very often in environments like school, that might lead to punitive discipline, and of course that can be further traumatizing. But if I understand neuroplasticity correctly, really what it is the hope, right? That these things that happen to us, these experiences that might result in trauma, can lead to changes that can make it more difficult. But the superpowers you mentioned of neuroplasticity is not necessarily about healing per se, but it's about our brain can get rewired through being intentional, and through the amazing ability of that neuroplasticity, the brain to make new connections. So is that what you're saying with intentional neuroplasticity? Is that by calling attention to, by focusing on things that can help us, that we can begin to make more neural connections that then make us, then that's into the neuroplasticity, but can make us more resilient, or better able to handle adversity, trauma, to be more resilient? Would that be a simplified way of putting this, or?
No, I absolutely do. And I love how you can take that concept and share that. And really, when we think about resiliency, it's in neuroplasticity, it's really about flexibility of the nervous system. We don't ever get it done or really get it right. I mean,
Right.
it's a process. And I don't want to define resiliency, because it's really not a thing or a
Right.
noun.
Right.
I really believe that resiliency is a process, and it's really about awareness. And I just shared this morning, I was with a large school just this morning, my last presentation for 2 weeks, and I just said to everybody that the goal is not regulation, and I talk about this in the book. The goal is to be aware of your nervous system. That is so hopeful.
Mm.
And that's where I want an administrator, a school counselor, a therapist, a social worker, a mom. This book is for all of us to
Mhm.
really become aware of how we're experiencing the body,
Mhm.
and to become fluent in the language of the body. And
Mhm.
this is something that, when we can teach a 5-year-old to recognize when their face gets hot and their ears buzz and their hands get warm, or their belly hurts, or their chest feels tight, or they can't get a deep breath, then this is moving towards post-traumatic growth. This
Mhm.
is moving towards the flexibility of the nervous system and learning the language.
Mhm. The word resilience sometimes gives me different thoughts. And one of the concerns that I always have around resilience is that we shouldn't take advantage of our resilience, meaning that we shouldn't look
Mhm.
at resilience as a reason to do things to people that shouldn't be done to people, right? We shouldn't say, well, kids are resilient, and so it's okay. Um, but of course, there is that potential, but to unlock that potential sometimes needs help and guidance and awareness, and that's what you're talking about, is kind of bringing that. And of course, what we really want to do is where can we lessen trauma, adversity, better support children. But it really is, because we do have a lot of a lot of, when we look at schools, we have a lot of kids that are bringing in a lot of trauma, generational trauma,
Mhm.
trauma from poverty, trauma from a lot of our staff, and our teachers have experienced a lot of trauma. We've all been through a lot of trauma in these last few years. So, while again, we don't want resilience to be the reason that, that we continue to do things that we shouldn't be doing, that superpower, as you say it, if you begin to know and understand it. And that sounds like, from what I've read in the book and what you've described is, you wanted to move beyond that. Yeah, we know these things are bad. We know these things are harmful, into the now what. So tell me a little bit more about the now what,
Mhm.
and why that's important, and for all of us in these times. So
Mhm.
what do you see as the focus of the now what in the book?
Well, so I feel like the focus, and these are the words of Resma Menachem, who I quote frequently in this new book. He calls having a disruption in a system, or disrupting the system, and Matthew Portell talks about this a lot, is compassionate agitation. And so I am seeing the now what, really looking at the adult nervous systems and leadership and a systemic change. But leadership is critical, Guy. I am seeing in so many of our schools and districts, which is not a negative. I think the wound is open. And I think that we are seeing, with the teacher shortage, with this just fatigue, third or fourth, 3.5 years in a pandemic, and just the overall exhaustion. I mean, really exhaustion from feeling that from our teachers and administrators, that this is the now what really calls for schools to really start having these authentic conversations within. And it starts with leadership. It starts with leadership. And I'm not talking about just an administrator. I'm talking about top leadership. This is about the top leadership. And it's so important to really understand. We know that emotions are contagious, but we also know that our nervous systems have evolved for adaptation. And so I don't, and what I mean by that is that when we felt and seen and heard, that changes the way we respond in our experiences. And so when I talk about now what, it's our top leadership listening deeply to the needs of a district. I just see a disconnect in almost every district I'm in right now, meaning from top leadership to the middle, aspects of the leadership down to the teachers. You can have a school with every educator on board, but if the leadership is not there, it's just going to be tremendously challenging to make these shifts into, we say, from states of protection into states of growth. That's that kind of moving on that continuum.
So I'll ask the $1 million question, which is kind of how we bring leadership along. But let me back that up with a little bit of a story, and kind of an observation. When these have been difficult times, right? Uh,
Mm.
you were one of the first people I heard probably 3 years ago articulate that, when we get back after the pandemic, that these are going to be really tough times, that we've all been through this additional adversity and trauma. And unfortunately, I mean, I hate to say unfortunately you were right, but unfortunately you were right. They have been tough times. So what does that manifest as? Well, it manifests as stress, trauma, behavior. So we are seeing an increase maybe in behaviors in classrooms across the country. We are seeing we're seeing problems in terms of teacher retention and staff turnover. But when I look at these things at a 50,000-foot view, what I see is something that's all connected. But what we often see in response to the issues is focus only on the issue. So school discipline, what are we going to do? Well, we need to do something. So we're to increase out of school suspensions or expulsions or referrals or whatever they may be, which of course isn't solving the problem. It's actually probably it is making the problem worse. When we use these punitive approaches, things are going to get worse. When we think about teacher retention, the thing that comes to mind to me is that if we're able to systemically make some of the changes that you and others advocate for, these high level changes, we're going to end up with safer environments for the kids, end up with safer environments for the staff, end up with better school environments for the administrators, and retention will follow, and teacher satisfaction will follow. But there's such a tendency to drill down into the micro issue, right? And miss the bigger picture. And your work, what I see is the big picture. And of course, you talk in the book about Nest, and I want to get into that as well. But let me ask that first question, which is, how do we get administrators on board during these tough times when sometimes the gut reaction is to do more of what's not been working? I actually was in a meeting recently, and I had an administrator in that meeting say something to the effect of, we were talking about restraint and seclusion and a number of other things, but the administrator stood up at one point and said, well, I want to address the elephant in the room. And truth is that these kids, we only have them for so many days a year, and we can't control what's happening to them outside of the classroom. And a lot of these kids are coming. And the whole thing went on, but the essence was almost like, well, we give up on these kids because they have trauma elsewhere. And I can't help but think to myself, schools have kids for 10 months out of the year for a majority of their waking time. We don't give up on people. We want to help them, and by helping them, we're to get a better place. But we're up against schools that are doubling down on punitive approaches, are giving up on kids, which is heartbreaking. So how do we get to that change at that high level that you're talking about?
Well, that is the $1,000,000 question. And
That's why I prefaced it that way.
yeah. So I feel that we've got to start, first of all, looking at the discipline data. And I think my favorite chapter in this new book is, well, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I love chapter 5 because I really talk about the power of storytelling.
Right.
And in each of our autonomic nervous system states, we hold a story, and collectively we hold stories. And our discipline data holds a story of where we've been as a school, where we are, and then if we are authentic with each other, where we want to go. So we've got to begin to look at the data because it really does share the story. And when we think about, how we start moving into the now what with leadership, we've got to be informed about the science. And that's why I'm just trying to get the science out there. As educators, we work with nervous systems almost more than any other profession. And yet we're not taught that in our pre-service education. We are not, administrators are not taught. And so this is new. This is burgeoning research. So I think we've got to look at the stories, and it really calls us to self-reflect and then to really have those hard discussions. This book is filled with questions. And we sometimes move away from questions because we want the quick fix. We want the algorithm. We want the solution.
Right.
And I've asked in chapter 5, when we take a deep dive into district discipline, when we look at systemic changes, there is a section in each. So the hero's journey is, Joseph Campbell's monomyth. So I take each individual through the hero's journey, and then I take the hero's journey into a collective story. So this is like a tangible activity that we can do as a school, as a district. So connections over compliance really was focused more on the individual nervous system. But, I think through this growth and through looking at system change, we've got to be able to have those hard discussions. I just said to a school district this week, you can have all the professional development in the world. You can bring in all the experts, and you need to have some mentoring, and we need the science. But the ultimate shift comes from within, and it comes from those hard discussions, and they're uncomfortable. That's why I love Resmaa Menakem's definition of compassionate agitation, moving us into some changes that feel very uncomfortable for most of us.
Yeah, you mentioned Matthew Portell, and we talk sometimes about being disruptors, and we need, we need disruptors, and not only do we need disruptors on the outside, some of our kids are disruptors, and they're trying to change the system too, and we need to respect that. I often think that there's far deeper problems with the education system, in that one of the primary focuses is about compliance. And we need to encourage. I mean, without disruptors, there's so many things in this world that we would be missing. And you are a disruptor. Matthew is a disruptor. But of course, we're doing this in a way to try to support and work with systems and try to bring people along. And hopefully, the outcome is positive change. I mean, this is really important work. I want to remind people, because we're coming up to time here shortly, and I want to be mindful of your time, but I want to remind people here. I know I'm dominating this conversation right now with questions, but if you have a question you'd like to ask about the new book, and of course you've not had a chance to read it, but if you have a question that you would like to ask about the new book, feel free to put that in the chat, and I'll try to get to a couple questions before we end our segment today. But I wanted to ask you, Lori, to talk a little bit. One of the things that you talked about in the book that resonated with me was this idea of nest, and of course that last illustration that we looked at as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about this idea of nest and really what you're getting at with kind of creating nest environments in schools?
So, and again, I love the illustration that Alexis and Reagan created for this chapter. I studied bird nests over the summer and last spring, and ridiculously so, and looked at all the materials that go into a nest. And I actually have a nest right outside my office window that's 12 months a year. I mean, these birds are in it constantly. And so when we think about a nest, I think about spaces that hold not just our children, but hold the adults. So they hold the family. And there are people and spaces that we are drawn to just because they feel safe to us.
And I've got to say, Lori, you're one of my safe people. You feel safe to me. So, yeah.
Thank you, Guy. And I just, and so when I think about building the nest, it really is about building this space of felt safety where children and adults and adolescents, where we all can share our authenticity freely, that we can tap into that deep identity that Zaretta Hammond talks about, talking about our purpose and talking about, what does equity mean for us? What does it feel like when we are misunderstood? And it's really just a space where we can share without judgment, that we can be validated, that we can, just be. And it doesn't really, it's not about the things in the space. It's really about the energy or the synergy that creates that nest. And so in that chapter, we talk about focused attention practices. We talk about nervous system aligned bell work. So there are practices that contribute to nourishing the nest. But it really is about the work I do on myself. And when I walk down hallway B in Belzer 2 times a week, that's all I'm thinking about is what type of a nest am I going to create for my 7th grade students during advisory this afternoon.
I think about the concept of what you're talking about with nest, and I think about, we hear a lot the words mental health these days, and certainly these have been trying times, and mental health is a critical issue. But as I think about the nest, when you have a safe place, a safe person, a place where you feel unconditionally loved and safe, I think that is such an important thing for everyone's mental health. So, this whole concept of nest, I think, really resonates. It's not just about, doing discipline differently. It's about better supporting humans based on what we know. One of the things I really love about your work, and you've reiterated today, is the importance of the adult nervous system, the importance of the adult awareness. And, it's interesting because very often a lot of our programs are really focused on the kid. When a kid's having a hard time, the kid needs a change. The kid is the problem. The kid who, of course, has the least developed nervous system, the least amount of experiences. And again, that's very often where the focus is. But your work, you always focus on the fact that understanding our brain and body and our nervous system is not just something that we want to teach to children, which you do in your work, but we need to understand about ourselves as well. And again, getting to that well-regulated nervous system as adults, and being mindful of that, through which we view kids, is so critical. And again, it's such an important thing in a world that very often is just focused on the individual, just focused on the kid, who is most often having a hard time, not trying to give somebody a hard time, not trying to do something personal. So I really appreciate that focus of all of your work. So I just want to look here quickly at our comments. And Anna is in New Zealand, as I recall. And Anna,
Yes,
our
yes,
kids are our best teachers when we acknowledge their autonomic nervous system. So Anna was in your program a couple of cohorts ago, right?
yes,
Yep.
she was. Oh,
Yep.
hi, Anna. I love
Let's see. Megan said, we are the Eagles, and I'm excited to read about the nest. Megan does some amazing work as well. Somebody that I actually met at Matthew Portel's event. Let's see. Michelle said, my students' experiences have been learning to fight teachers from a corner. Yeah, unfortunately, Michelle has experienced restraint seclusion with her children. And again, this is something that we talk about having safe places. Adults unfortunately can also cause trauma, even when well-intentioned. And when you're making someone feel unsafe, that leads to a lot of difficulty. Let's see, a couple other comments here. Oh, okay. Linda, also in New Zealand. So I love when my New Zealand friends are here, because I feel really cool to say we've got people in New Zealand. It's always sounds great. So Linda, of course, is a big proponent of the work of Bruce Perry, and works also with Anna. So people doing fantastic work. We have here Amy from Wisconsin Family Ties. Just thank you for being such strong advocates and talking about items that a lot of people won't, because it doesn't fit with their organization, school, or they're just uncomfortable talking about it. And you're so right. You said this earlier, Lori. And I think about when I was in Nashville recently at Matthew's conference, and he had something on the screen about, uncomfortable versus unsafe, right? That sometimes in having these discussions, they can be uncomfortable, but it's shouldn't be unsafe. But we need to sometimes, push and really think about how to affect change. So it looks like a question here from Laura. I work with 3 and 4-year-olds. How could I explain these concepts to this age group? Love the topic and strive to incorporate as much as I can. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is really the perfect age to begin these discussions. And we use visual images. I bring in objects. So, when we talk about how we feel in our bodies, I'll bring in a pine cone. I might bring in a nail file. I might bring in a marble. We talk about sensations. And we talk about smooth and edgy and prickly and tight and tense. And and so we begin to talk about how our bellies feel, and when our hearts beat fast. So we have sensation walls and sensation jars that I've talked about for a long time. So this is when the nervous system has a lot of stickiness, and when those experiences are remembered. So this is the perfect time. We use rhythm and movement and sensation with our 3 and 4-year-olds at St. Mary's Early Childhood Centers here in Indianapolis. And actually, we had the directors go through the Applied Educational Neuroscience cohort with us. Guy, I wanted to share something. I took notes from my own book before we came on, and going back to the adult nervous system. I want to share this before we end today. When we talk about the nest, it's really holding. And I think we need to think it's holding another's experience. It's a place where we develop a relational window of tolerance. We talk about individual windows of tolerance. So, we know that sometimes when we're having an off day, our window of tolerance has, it's close, it's tiny. But we also hold a relational window of tolerance as a grade level, as a school, as a district. And so when we can hold another's experience, that can create this, this relational widening, this window of tolerance that begins to help shape one another's nervous system. And so this is something that I talk a lot about, in the book, is shaping, and this almost like a mutual aid, kind of the serve and return that we can create when we are talking and really embodying co-regulation. So our bodies, again, I get so excited. We hold resiliency. We don't hold just trauma. And and this is where we need to really begin to focus and to be attuned and intentional to the possibilities that we're not even acknowledging at this point, individually or collectively.
I always love the word intentional, especially in this context, because it really does take intent. It really does take, let's be meaningful about what we're doing. I love that. Let me ask you this, and I got a couple more things, and then we'll wrap up, because I don't want to keep you forever. I know you always have a lot of things going on. Any kind of, what is your hope for the book? So as the book is getting out into the world, and hopefully people, in fact, I know that Courtney behind the scenes has been sharing the links so that people can pre-order the book. But what is your hope for the book? What are you hoping that, because it's more about just putting the thoughts and ideas out. I know when you do work like this, it's really about bringing about change. So what are your hopes?
So my hope for this book is to really open up some hard discussions, and to provide. I feel like I have spent a year and a half researching the power of questions and the application of the research. So I really hope this book is really about setting the table for discussion, for the power of questions, and for really taking a deeper dive into the collective nervous systems that we carry as communities, that we carry as a school, as a grade level, as a department, and really understanding, that this resiliency that we are capable of needs another. That we don't develop this beautiful skill of emotional regulation without thousands of moments of co-regulation. And school is the de facto. I've always said that. That's where our kids are. That's where our families are. And so we've been very busy the past 18 months creating templates, which are in the back of this new book. This whole resource section in the back of this book is new. And they're QR coded so that you can access those documents, print them out, and begin to use them.
So when somebody asks what I do, how do I get there? You've done that. You're giving real world things that people can do. That's fantastic. Well, let me hit a couple more comments here, and then I will wrap up. Anna, by the way, said that your course was the best study I've done in 34 years as a teacher. And based on all the things that I've heard from others that have been through this, I have no doubt. Rob said it takes a tremendous energy to disrupt systems that no longer work. This work is so timely and impactful. I cannot wait to share it. So I know that your book will, once it gets out there, really be getting shared around. Laura, who asked the question earlier about the 3 and 4-year-old, said, thanks, I do similar things. And you've given me ideas for taking it further. I appreciate you and your work. And have another one here from Michelle. Thank you for empowering families, individuals, and teachers. So lots of positive feedback here from everybody. Lori, I can't thank you enough. It's been such a pleasure to have gotten to know you and gotten to work alongside of you. The things that you're doing are, really making a difference. And I know that you, like me, it's not happening quickly enough, and there's more we want to do. But, this work that you've been doing through the books you've been writing, and this book will continue. Oops, I'm going the wrong way here, to make a positive difference. So just want to thank you for, you very often use the word gift. And I always want to kind of turn it back to you and say, Laura, you are a gift to all of us, to teachers, the parents, the families. I appreciate you today, not only sharing your work, but sharing with us, Reagan and Alexi's, and the work that they did in bringing this to life. Really a lot of fun to talk to them and hear about their process and talk about how all these things came to be. I will share with people real quickly here. We did actually a little mini review of your book, which we have online now. And at the bottom of it is also a link where people can go and pre-order the book. So if you go to the Alliance website, endseclusion.org, that's actually linked from the homepage right now. So would encourage people to do that. Definitely, pre-order it. And, there's nothing more exciting than getting pre-order the day it comes out. So Lori, thank you so much for all that you do. I've had the privilege of meeting Reagan and your husband as well, Michael, who hopefully is watching right now. Tell Michael I look forward to seeing him again. And the kids love the dessert, by the way, and nobody else will know what I'm talking about, but Reagan will. So at any rate, I'll just share a couple of the final thank yous here. Amy said thank you both. Anna said thank you both for your amazing work. Our friend Greg Santucci, occupational therapist, said you're both great gifts. Thank you, Greg, and likewise, you're out there doing amazing work. Megan, as are you. This can be a lonely journey. I needed this conversation. Megan, I'm glad to hear that. And it's having Megan as another ally in this work and doing amazing work. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing the book out and in hands. And I would encourage people, again, not only to pre-order it, but be ready to buy extra copies to share with, if you're a leader, a school leader, share with your staff. If you're an educator, share with other educators. If you're a parent, share with others. The more we can do to share, the more we can come together, the more influence we can have and influence and change. So, Lori, if I could hug you right now, I would. But thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for the time today. Amazing. So, yep.
Absolutely. And this will be available for people to go back and look at. And of course, I will send you all of the links, and we will talk again, hopefully real soon. So Lori, thanks. Everyone that was watching today, thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you again. We have another program coming up in 2 weeks. And I look forward to seeing folks then. So thank you all.